All right. Thank you so much for downloading today's episode. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for downloading today's episode of Karl Buys Houses here on Sell More Homes Now on YouTube or on my podcast if you're listening there at karlbuyshouses.com. Thank you so much for paying attention and listening today. What we're going to talk about is a very narrow conversation today. I know a lot of times I like to talk about national issues or great big evergreen issues, as you might say. But today, what we're going to talk about is something a little bit different. Today, what we're going to talk about is the topic of, is Tucson affordable? Now, this topic comes up a lot more often than you might be wanting to think about. And as a matter of fact, the University of Arizona did a study about this. You can find this at the Arizona Public Media website. It's azpm.org. You can find this. This article is by Nick O'Gara. I'm going to leave an article link to that in the YouTube as well as the podcast links for you to go ahead and listen to. But let's just go ahead and listen to what Nick O'Gara has to say about this with this University of Arizona's group analysis. Listen in.
If you're spending more than 30% of your household income on housing, you're what economists call housing cost burdened. In the Tucson metro area, there are more than 130,000 such households, and of those, almost 15% make less than $20,000 a year. Jennifer Pullen is an economist with the Eller College of Management's MAP Dashboard project. She says that proportion is higher in Tucson than it is in Arizona and the rest of the country.
This tells us that those in our lower income bracket struggle to find affordable housing relative to the nation.
She says, in general, Tucson is an affordable place when compared to some peer metro areas in the West, but that doesn't tell the whole story, especially for Tucsonans earning the least. I'm Nick O'Gara, Arizona Public Media.
And I think this is a really important point because when you start looking at Tucson and the question of affordability, the automatic question, at least from my perspective, is housing. Is housing affordable here? Now, the housing here in Tucson has actually gone up. The median sales price here in Tucson is $250,000 now. It's incredibly high. It's much higher than it was during the pre-crash levels in 2008. So this means for people who are actually living in that lower end of the spectrum, they're spending more of their money on a property. That's really what this means. And if you're lower end, then that means there's 132,000 properties here in Tucson alone that meet this criteria. And so what you're finding is your neighbors and friends and family members out there who are trying to buy property, thinking about buying property, at least prior to this coronavirus stuff going around, right? And maybe they're still thinking about it. But the problem is that they're having trouble buying it because the amount of money that they need to borrow to get that property in order to secure it is just too high because their debt is too much. I mean, they can't go over more than 30%. Their debt is just too high. And so therefore, when they have any problem, the least little thing, well, that's when they find themselves in the problem. This article says in Tucson, it was often characterized as cheap or affordable, breaking down how much these different income groups are spending on keeping a roof over their head gives a better idea of the city's housing landscape. The Making Action Possible Arizona dashboard, run through the University of Arizona's Eller College of Management, found that Tucsonans in the metropolitan statistical area who earned the least were having a harder time finding affordable housing compared to Arizona and the nation in 2017. So if you're making a fair amount of money, if you're making over $60,000 and you're deciding to come to Tucson, Arizona as a place to live, it's not bad. I mean, the price of living here is fairly inexpensive. But if you're not making very much money, this can be a very bad place to live because it can be very expensive. Jennifer Pullen says that the standard measure for the housing cost burden is when the housing spends more than 30% of its income on housing, including things like utilities, taxes, and insurance. By the way, this is something that your lender takes a look at too when you're trying to buy a property. So many of you might be like me, having family members or friends who are talking about buying property. Well, you have to understand that there are limitations on your debt to income ratio and what you can owe people before you buy. Jennifer Pullen goes on to say that homes that are housing cost burdened, tend to struggle to pay for other necessities like childcare, healthcare, food, and transportation. I think we called that being house that. Here's why I say that. The reason why is real clear. The interest rates are in flux, the markets are in flux, and right now, if you're trying to buy a property, the interest rates going down like this is only going to stimulate those people who have to buy to buy. So if you don't have to buy, if you can wait for a little while, might not be a bad idea to wait. And I know that that's not something that the realtors are typically going to tell you, but I'm not your typical. Hit me up on Twitter or hit me up on Instagram at Karl K. Realtor. Thank you so much for paying attention. And until next time, have a powerful sales day. Bye-bye.